What's up, Kansas City? This is April Flowers, and I have a special guest today, Mr. Marvin Lyman, who is President and CEO of the Black Economic Union of Kansas City. And today we're going to be speaking about the economic environment of Kansas City and what it's going to look like in the future. Tell us about the Black Economic Union.
Well, first, April, let me say thank you for having us here on your show today. We appreciate the opportunity. The Black Economic Union was founded back in 1968. It was an outgrowth of the Ali Summit of 1967. At that time, Muhammad Ali was defying entry into the draft, and he was needing support. So the Honorable Jim Brown, with the Cleveland Browns football team, he was retiring from football, and he had formed a National Negro Economic Improvement Association, and he convened the top black male athletes of that time, Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bobby Mitchell, and several others, and he convened them on behalf of Muhammad Ali to gain support for Ali. So in doing that, they also decided that they would do something else which was really critical, which was to affect black and urban gentrification, much like what we're experiencing now in Kansas City and metropolitan areas across the country. And so the Black Economic Union was founded then, and our mission is to provide ownership development opportunities within the black community primarily, and to make sure that we have a place that we can call our own.
Sounds very significant and important. Sounds like something Kansas City needs. Okay, so what is the Black Economic Union doing about the economic development of Kansas City as we speak?
So we are working in the South Vine District with some of our development partners there, in particular Enterprise Village ecosystem. So we have made several trips out to the West Coast and East Coast sourcing capital. The problem that we encounter with development is that you don't have we really lack the opportunity to get large capital from a lot of the major financiers in the area. And so what we've done is looked at ways that we could source capital from private equity, in the form of private equity, and companies that manage funds outside of the Kansas City region. So we've been doing that. In addition, we have been building pro formas for various multifamily mixed-use projects that would make sense, giving our folks a chance to own, to live, learn, work, play within the community, and not to abandon what so many of us have sold into the success of the 18th and Vine Jazz District.
I'm glad you mentioned the 18th and Vine Jazz District. The ordinance was just passed to give more funds to the building of the 18th and Vine District. How will that help the district and help Kansas City?
You know, that's a great question. You know, recently that ordinance passed by way of the city manager in particular being very creative in making sure that the ordinance did not bomb. And so that $27.6 million bond issue was passed by the city council, and what that will do, the first phase is going to leverage $7 million for the district, and we will see a new parking lot being installed at 18th and Lydia. In addition to that, we'll see monies that will go toward the stabilization of some of the facades that have failed. Hopefully, on the second phase of the ordinance, or the second phase of financing, we'll be able to build brick and mortar buildings behind those facades, or incorporate those facades in such a way to maintain the historic integrity of the district. And another component of that funding is that the Kansas City Friends of Alvin Ailey, they have a building project before them, and so that money will aid the development of that facility, and they're looking at the Boone Theater as a redevelopment project. So when you bring in those public monies, it gives a chance for a public-private partnership to develop. And so now we have a greater opportunity of getting private equity to be involved in the redevelopment of 18th and Vine Jazz District. My only concern is that we make sure that with that private equity comes black ownership development opportunities. I think that it often gets lost in that particular subject often gets lost in the conversation as we talk about private capital, but the ownership, because we know that black people tend to employ black people, and if we're not there with those businesses, then we don't have the opportunity to create wealth. You can't pass on a job, but you can pass on a business.
Right. That sounds exciting. So Kansas City is comprised of 6 councilman districts. How does this impact each development district?
You know, our district is, our city is affected immensely because of our 6 councilmatic districts. And let me explain why. Essentially, Kansas City is made of roughly 320 square miles. That averages to about 1,492 persons per square mile. You take the city of St. Louis, about 66 square miles, and they average just under 5,000 persons per square mile. What does that mean in dollars and cents? That means you have almost 5,000 people, potential taxpayers, per square mile in St. Louis, whereas we have more than 5 times the amount of space, but we have 3 times less the amount of taxpayers available to support all of the infrastructure. So when you look at areas that expand, particularly in the Northland and in eastern Kansas City and South Kansas City, we have infrastructure that we cannot currently support to the degree that we need to in those 320 square miles, and we're adding new infrastructure in certain areas. And so as we add that new infrastructure, then that new infrastructure in terms of roads and bridges and sidewalks and curbs and parkways and such, as we add that, we've got to figure out how do we continually finance that as well as take care of what already exists. The only way that we can really effectively have better economic development, particularly in the black community, is to have a targeted focus on the black community and being creative, such as the city manager was in protecting that ordinance for the $27.6 million for 18th and Vine. So it's a complicated issue to some degree, but it doesn't mean that we're not smart enough to come up with a solution. I think the other thing that needs to happen in that respect is that, you know, we have to look at the areas of greatest need. Right. And so the areas of greatest need tend to be the 3rd district and the 5th district. Right. And so that means we've got to have a special solution. When I go to the doctor, if I go to the doctor for chest pain, I don't want to see the orthodontist. Right. I want to see the heart specialist. Exactly. And so Kansas City is no different. So when we start looking at the east side of Kansas City and what the needs are for the black community, we got to have something that's very prescriptive and that creates ownership, management, development, and employment, not just jobs. Right. Because black people have always had jobs. The city is the greatest employer, along with the federal and government, of black people in Kansas City. And municipalities and federal government across the country are greatest employers of black people. But you can't pass on a job. Right. Wow. It's a lot of good information. So what strategies would you propose to bolster the growth of Kansas City? So, very good question. Mm-hmm. As you know, or will come to know, that I'm a very solution-focused person. And so, for me, I believe that one of the things that can be done is for black people to begin to pool our economic resources. So, it doesn't matter that I don't have $1 million in my bank account, but if I take my hundreds or my thousands and others take their hundreds and their thousands and we put them together, then sure enough, we can come up with $1 million that may be needed to jumpstart a project. Most of these projects that could spur development within our community won't take millions of dollars, but they're smaller projects. But as we come up with our cash, then we can leverage the city of Kansas City, for example, or leverage those dollars with LISC and other entities and get them to match those funds. We could also leverage those monies with the we can also leverage those funds with the giving foundations here in Kansas City. the Greater Kansas City Community Foundation,
Right.
for example, or Kaufman. So that gives us that seed money. So that's one thing we can do, is pool our economic resources. The second thing that we can do is begin to talk with our political leadership to work with our development entities, such as a Black Economic Union or 12th Street Heritage Community Development Corporation. Our CDCs must be seen as being an integral part of development, and not just this outside entity that we choose not to deal with for whatever reasons. These organizations were created by our people whom we have great respect for, and they're viable organizations that bring the expertise needed to bring projects that work for our community. We know our community better than anybody. You know, again, going back to the example of the heart surgeon, you don't want the foot doctor working on your heart. You want somebody who knows how your heart operates. And so Black people want Black people who understand community development, economic development, because it's not just about brick and mortar and building skylines, but it's about building people. It's the people that make up a city, not just the buildings. If the buildings exist and there are no people, the buildings will wither away, much like the thousands of dilapidated homes on the east side of Kansas City. Third thing that we must do is work together with groups like Cascade Media to get the word out about what's happening in our community and how we come together. Also, and then the fourth thing that we must do is hold retailers within our community accountable. You know, we spend a lot of money on hair care products. I don't, but we do collectively. So we spend a lot of money on hair care products. We spend a lot of money on alcohol. We spend a lot of money on food. So where we have those entities such as the hair care, not necessarily the hair care providers, but the hair care suppliers within our community, where those places are not owned by us, those folks should be contributing within our community. Those folks should be contributing to the economic development within our community. Our Little Leagues teams, our Girl Scouts, our Boy Scouts, our dance troops and such. Those entities should do what Leon Stapleton has done for years in sponsoring teams with Leon's Thriftway.
Yes.
And so those are some things that we have to do, even with the gas stations that are not owned by us. We ought to hold those folks accountable and demand that, hey, we're spending money here every day or every week, and because we're spending those dollars, we want you to, in turn, reinvest in our community, in us. Not tell us how to use the money. We determine that, but give us the money, give us some of those dollars back, much like a cash back rewards program on a credit card. So those are some of the things that we can do that are really critical to building our community.
Okay, well, I tell you what, it was a pleasure, one, hearing your passion about Kansas City and also about just economics in general. This is April Flowers, and I have the esteemed guest, Mr. Marvin Lyman of the Black Economic Union, President and CEO. Thanks again for stopping by.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and definitely, and remember, every moment counts.